You ever know anyone who had just, terrible timing? Like someone who was otherwise genuinely affable but couldn't just for the life of them figure out how to do the thing they needed to do when they needed to do it. Or maybe they put in a bunch of work into a project that was actually really well done, only to submit it a hair past a deadline, or right after someone who had literally just pitched the exact same project. Or maybe they were just constantly in the wrong place at the wrong time. What about films or games? Case in point, on June 11th, 1982, a little film called E.T. the Extraterrestrial was released. It was a massive, massive hit for director Steven Spielberg, who understood how to play on audience emotions and brought to the silver screen a warm tale of friendship that went beyond species. Meanwhile, 2 weeks later, on June 25th, 1982, John Carpenter's horror masterpiece The Thing was released into theaters, and it was an immediate bomb. Audiences had been won over by the feel-good spectacle of E.T., so the depressing, cynical tale of paranoia amongst a group of men in the Antarctic was met with lukewarm reception by audiences and critics alike. Nowadays, we praise it for the masterpiece that it truly is, but that initial release just had the worst timing of trying to scare filmgoers with aliens, when they were still feeling the afterglow of child-friendly platonic alien relationships. Sometimes, such as the case with E.T., good timing can mean everything to a piece of art or media. And sometimes, with The Thing, bad timing means a brilliant work of cinema can be cast to the side and left to languish for years before finally garnering a proper reception. Today's game, well, you'll just have to see for yourself. Blake Stone, Aliens of Gold arrived on December 3rd, 1993. Developed by Jam Productions and published by Apogee Software, Blake Stone was crafted using the Wolfenstein engine. It had been close to a year and a half since the release of Wolfenstein, and the game was still going strong in popularity. Apogee, who had also published Wolfenstein, saw the game's release numbers and immediately set to work creating new games based on or around the game's engine. While there was a sequel to Wolfenstein already in the works, a sequel which would eventually be reworked and retitled Rise of the Triad, well, we'll get there. Oh, don't you worry, we'll get there. Apogee was looking for developers to outsource a new first-person shooter utilizing the Wolfenstein engine while said sequel was getting underway. Knowing this, John Romero suggested the team of Jim Rowe and Mike Maynard of Jam Productions, a duo Romero had worked with during his days at Softdisk. Rowe and Maynard now worked with artist Jerry Jones, and the three of them comprised Jam Productions at the time. Introductions were made, hands were shaken, and Jam was given the task of creating what was essentially the follow-up to Wolfenstein, something that would have been daunting to any developer. What they ended up creating was a fast-paced, innovative game that took the base of Wolfenstein and built even more on top of it. Playing it nowadays, especially after having played Wolfenstein so recently, it's really hard to not see the amount of work and extra layering that Rowe and Maynard added into Blake Stone. There were, unfortunately, a few things that they missed along the way, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Now, kids, I remember seeing advertisements for this game back in the day when I was 10. This was, of course, just after being introduced to Wolfenstein and having played Ken's Labyrinth for a while, so the concept of the emerging first-person shooter was already one not lost on my childish mind. But where Wolf 3D and Ken had something that made them pop and stand out as gaming experiences, there was something about Blake Stone that made it look like it was just another computer game. The distinction between computer game and PC game is a massive, massive distinction that I will have to go into in further detail at some other time. But in 1993, there was a Super Nintendo and a Sega Genesis with fast-paced games that had large, detailed, colorful graphics that desktops were just not capable of producing at the time. Sound effects, graphics. The computer gaming industry was a couple years behind the times at the time, which makes it even more fascinating how quickly and over so short a time the PC gaming market would catch up to and arguably surpass the console market in terms of flexibility and power. But at the time, computer games were very different from PC games. They were very different from video games even. A computer game was almost a dirty, nerdy word that signified that you didn't care about graphics or good gameplay, but you were more focused on playing with technology rather than playing with entertainment. At the time, Blake Stone looked and felt like a computer game, a little behind the times, and with my ever-diligent mother preventing me from owning anything resembling a violent game, I just never felt the interest in trying it out. But here we are, and now I get to see what the fuss was all about. Firstly, for this video, I played through Blake Stone using the B-Stone source port, which adds high-resolution support, and WASD control support, which is absolutely fucking necessary for playing this game on any level higher than novice. It's easy to download and unzip, and all you have to do is have Blakestone installed on your computer and the source port will detect it. So thankfully, there's no fancy finagling or finicky installing to get it working. Blakestone's setup is a sci-fi spy thriller with ray guns and aliens and mutants and corporate espionage. It definitely feels like a mashup of James Bond and J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, which wow, that's actually a really cool thought. I would love to see that on the big screen. And one thing you'll notice while playing the game is that Aliens of Gold does not shy away from the violence. Every enemy seems to explode on death, and holy shit! Blakestone is an agent of British intelligence sometime in the future, tasked with infiltrating the laboratories of one Dr. Goldfire, a traditional mega-villain who discovered a way to synthesize pure gold, which in turn funded his highly illegal genetic experiments to create horrific mutations as a part of his effort to take over the world. It's a game from the 90s, kids. Just roll with it. As Blake, you'll be tasked with blasting your way through 6 separate episodes, or as this game refers to them, missions. You'll start out only with your trusty silenced blaster pistol, but soon discover more powerful weapons along the way. And as you progress through the heavily guarded environments, which are also infested with infernal mutations, you'll have to keep an eye out for scientists who are actually on your side, and will provide key information as well as items for Blake to use. Yeah, that's right, kids. One of Blakestone's innovations is being the first FPS game to incorporate NPCs. And now the thing with these scientists, or informants as the game calls them, is that you won't know who is who unless you walk up to them and press the use key to talk to them. Some scientists are actually informants and will help you, but some are still on Goldfire's payroll and will shoot to kill if you mess around too much. One really interesting part of this is that the game actually penalizes you if you kill informants indiscriminately, which was something I didn't understand in the beginning of the game because I thought I was just supposed to blast everything in sight. Yeah, it turns out you're not. One key factor in figuring out who is that the scientists will start shooting at you pretty quickly if you mess around, while informants will never draw weapons on you. So if a lab rat in a white coat starts moving really fast, turn and shoot quick. Another little neat innovation is the auto map. Now, I thought Wolfenstein had an auto map, but it turns out the auto map I was using in the video I made for that game was actually something added in for the source port and not part of the original release, which oh, that makes some of those backbreaking mazes in the later part of that game even more of a dick move. But gamers made their voices heard about getting lost too much in Wolfenstein, so Blakestone incorporated an auto map into the game design itself, which is really, really handy. Press tab and the auto map pops up, showing you the locations of doors and any important keycards you may have found but might not have access to quite yet. It's easy, intuitive, and I used it a lot because just like Wolfenstein, the map design in this game can get fucking labyrinthine sometimes. But what helps with the maze-like design is that many of the maps here are actually designed to be run one or two specific ways and then guide the player along a looping path, which is aided by the strategic placement of one-way doors. These doors have a triangle marking on one side and a circle on the other. Triangle means go through, circle means no go. Coming across a door with a circle marking generally means that at some point you'll find a pathway which will lead you back around to that door and then let you out, usually close to the elevator that players need to use at the start of the map. See, the game's maps are divided up into floors. Each building or laboratory that Blake blazes through is a continual ascent, starting at the first floor and ending at the 9th floor all the way at the top. Each floor will contain a red keycard that unlocks access to the next floor, with a variety of colored keycards to unlock other doors on that level. Which was a really neat concept to me, especially that if you want, you can return to the elevator and head back down a floor or two and go loot some ammo or health that you didn't pick up before, and then return to the floor that you're still trying to beat. On top of that, there are some switches on higher floors that unlock secret areas on a lower floor, providing the opportunity to head back down and increase your score. Yeah, just like Wolfenstein, Blakestone operates on the arcade-style score system, which is fine. I actually thought it worked better here anyway, and was more rewarding to boot. Regardless, Blake's adventure has him going up to the top floor, where each mission finds him in a short battle with Dr. Goldfire, and then some bullet sponge mega mutant, before Blake scoots away and then on to the next mission to service the kingdom. Goldfire will also sometimes randomly appear in the middle of a floor you're searching through. He'll take a few pot shots at you and then immediately teleport away if you hit him with a couple of shots of your own. He's a tricky little corporate bastard, always announcing his arrival with a brief transporting sound effect and then zipping away just when the going gets good. A fun fact, when Rowan Maynard originally created Goldfire, his name was Dr. Goldstern, but people complained that the name inadvertently made him look like he was Jewish, and also an evil, money-loving Jewish person at that. Not exactly a good look. Goldfire is a much better name in addition to avoiding accidental anti-Semitism, as it leans more into the James Bondian elements that the game has set up. Aside from the occasional mega-villain cameo, Blake will find himself mostly doing combat with a variety of Goldfire guards, all of whom are hit scanners, a surprisingly large cast of aliens and genetic monstrosities that Goldfire's company is working to create, and a few robotic nuisances here and there. The guards can be absolutely fucking disastrous to fight because just like with Wolfenstein, the hit scanners do not fuck around, and they can take you out in 2 or 3 well-placed shots if they're close enough. Wolfenstein's distance mechanics exist here too, so the further away from an enemy you are, the lower the damage you take from their bullets. But that also means that they take less damage from afar as well, so your best bet is to run towards them shooting the whole way, hopefully catching them off guard quick enough so they don't turn and shoot at you at the same time. It's a really weird gambit to know that they can one-shot you if you're too close, but knowing that you need to get closer to really put the hurt on them. Also adding to the stress of said situations is that, unlike Wolfenstein, there's no stun locking in this game. Oh yeah, you fucking heard right, kids. id Software had the presence of mind to have gunfire stun enemies in Wolfenstein, and if you fired your pistol fast enough, or used the rapid-fire machine gun, you could stun lock them and prevent them from shooting at you from close range. One of the few benefits to running up point-blank range to take out an enemy who would be equally, if not more, dangerous being that close to you. But Blake Stone doesn't have that feature. Sometimes enemies will flinch briefly when you're shooting at them, but otherwise they will just continue to move and shoot at you even as you're unloading into them. And considering that they take way more bullets than you do to go down, this can lead to some stupid fucking scenarios where you're confident that you can take someone out, but they just stand there and blast your ass despite you using one of the more powerful cannons in the game. Guards come in 3 flavors: the basic bitch security officers with their blue uniforms, blaster pistols, and sweet 90s mustaches, the Star Sentinels with purple uniforms and assault rifles, and the Green Beret motherfuckers who also carry assault rifles, but depending on how much damage you do to them, they will sometimes fall over and play possum on the ground like you killed them. But if you stick around too long, they'll get right back up and follow you and shoot you some more. These assholes were the bane of my existence in the later levels because they show up so fucking often, usually immediately around a corner where you can't see them, and you positively have to make sure that they stay the fuck down, or my god, will you regret it later. Fuck you. Fortunately, while the guards are hit scanners, most of the non-human enemies are not. Slimy little clay-faced dudes, plasma energy aliens, xenomorphs, most of them have projectiles that they throw at you from afar and you would think are easy to dodge, but Blake Stone must have the broadest shoulders of any British agent of all time because his hitbox is stupidly wide, and most of the time when you think you've slid far enough to the side to avoid a slime ball being thrown your way, it'll still hit you like, what the fuck? I even had times where I was hiding behind a corner to avoid damage, but if I wasn't completely behind the corner, if I could peek around it even in the slightest, I took damage from whoever was firing at me from the other side. This becomes even more of a problem when you're facing multiple enemies that toss projectiles at a more frequent rate than others. Like the plasma aliens, for example. They're glass cannons, disappearing in 1 or 2 shots from your guns. Super easy on paper, but they also fire something like 5 energy balls at a time, meaning if you're standing in the wrong place at the wrong time and you take all 5 of those to the chest, you're dead. You're just immediately dead. Making them even more hazardous is the fact that they will usually appear in groups, in rooms with outlets that spawn them infinitely. And then the mutated security guards, they can fuck right off. Just like the mutants in Wolfenstein, these fools absorb bullets all while emptying their clips into you, so your best bet is to strafe out of cover, fire a couple shots, strafe back into cover, back out, fire a couple more shots, just repeat until they're dead, because otherwise it is just a firing squad and you are the target. Making all of this stress even more stressful are the fucking ceiling turrets. Fuck these things. Ceiling turrets are exactly like how they sound. Turrets mounted on the ceiling that search for you and will fire hit scan bullets in your direction once they've spotted you. They do just as much damage as the guards, sometimes even more so, because it's really easy to not be paying attention and suddenly have 2 or 3 of them firing at you at once because you turned a corner and weren't looking at the ceiling. They blow up quickly from just a couple of shots, even from far away, so if you're diligent, you can take them out well in advance, but they only take damage from the 2 rifle-based weapons in the game. The blaster pistols? No, they don't damage the turrets. The fucking energy cannon, which explodes literally everything else in the game? Nope, that doesn't damage the turrets. So you absolutely, positively have to be 100% on your game, checking corners, checking ceilings, checking scientists, checking everything to see what can or could kill you, because if you don't, then they will. I just don't know how anyone managed to beat this game back in the day using only keyboard controls. The ability to strafe in and out of cover is so fucking important to surviving this game. Considering the frequency of hit scanners, the wide hitbox for Blake, and just how much punishment many of the enemies in the later maps can take, I'm almost tempted to call Aliens of Gold a cover shooter. Of course, our man Blake Stone isn't without armament himself. Oh no, striding into this secret agent situation, Blake Stone has a pretty sweet series of weaponry that he can pick up, all of which are mostly effective. Your standard blaster pistol, which you start every mission with, is a puny little shit. It has infinite ammo, but there's a short recharge delay between shots, so it's not something you're gonna swap back and forth to in order to save ammo. Usually you'll use it until you kill a guard with a better weapon, and you'll stick to that. The upgraded pistol is standard issue FPS pistol material. Shoots fast, does minimal damage, works in a pinch. The assault rifle is pretty much the machine gun from Wolfenstein, down to the animation and everything. But this is going to be your workhorse of the game. It'll take down pretty much every enemy in the game at a rapid pace and in the fewest amounts of shots, which is good considering that every weapon you've got runs off the same ammo pool. So no matter what you're using, you'll be thinking of ammo conservation, something that the double-barreled laser is not designed for. Oh, it's beefy, motherfucker. It fires fast, it fires loud. Yeah, just listen to this. You would think that this was the Gatling gun of the game, but unfortunately, it really isn't. Much as it feels good to use this gun, it takes enemies down in the same amount of time as the assault rifle. Sure, it appears to fire faster, but it doesn't seem to actually do that much more damage. In fact, I found myself consistently running out of ammo using this than with the assault rifle, mostly because this thing just chews up energy without any of the benefits. No, if you want to kill things quickly, then you're going to want to use the fucking energy cannon. This thing tosses a concentrated ball of plasma that explodes almost everything around it when it lands like a futuristic grenade launcher, and it is hideously effective when it wants to be. I don't know, sometimes the damn thing felt like all the damage numbers were just RNG. For the most part, you fire it and it explodes, and everything either explodes with it or it does enough damage that 1 or 2 shots from the assault rifle will finish them off. But I had a couple of times when I fired the cannon and the energy ball just passed through enemies and did nothing. And a couple of times I dropped 3 or 4 shots onto one enemy, which should have gone down after only one. So I really honestly couldn't tell just how much damage this goddamn thing was actually doing. Outside of boss fights, your best bet is to stick with the assault rifle. Watch your ammo consumption and stay focused. Of course, during boss fights, extreme prejudice is the way to go. At the end of every mission is a 2-stage boss fight. First up is Goldfire himself, who pops up for a lot longer than just teleporting in to fuck with you and then getting out. He takes a lot of damage before finally deciding to bitch out and use his teleporter to get away. And once you've gotten past him, then there's the alien boss immediately after. These fuckers do not mess around. Giant aliens who shoot massive projectiles at you and take a lot of damage before going down. You're gonna want to save up your ammo and fully utilize the damage potential of the energy cannon for these. But since their attacks are projectile based instead of hit scanning, they're a hell of a lot easier than the bosses in Wolfenstein, and will usually go down without much of a fuss, so long as you're nimble on your feet. Blake Stone does a great job of immersing the player in the world. First off, there's the overcomplicated and unnecessary HUD, which is just chock full of so much information that it's a little overwhelming at first. But I do like the little message box. It gives you information like what type of enemy is attacking you, or it displays messages from the informants, or it lets you know how many food tokens you have. Food tokens are used on food dispensers, which is another great aspect of the game. Sometimes enemies will drop tokens you can pick up and use on the dispensers, which will give you food and a bit of a health boost. The more tokens you have, the more food you can buy, and the more health you can recover. Some dispensers, though, are broken and unusable, and sometimes they'll break just after giving you 1 or 2 health items. Goldfire really needs to invest in some maintenance around here. But little touches like these add extra depth to the game beyond the established formula that Wolfenstein seemed to so effortlessly construct. Even the ceiling turrets, annoying as they are, provide a sense of verticality to the game, forcing the player to consider what is above them, even if there is no true 3D space. And with the colorful graphics, the unique aesthetic, and the technological innovations, Blake Stone absolutely builds upon the early foundation of the budding FPS genre. Where Blake Stone really missteps, though, is in the difficulty and repetitive nature of the game. Outside of the lack of stun-locking enemies who can kill you in 1 or 2 shots, the game really takes a steep difficulty spike with the introduction of Mission 4. Missions 1 through 3 are actually pretty well made. A nice, decent rise in difficulty through the maps, interesting mechanics to learn, fun if not sometimes frustrating combat. Honestly, if Blake Stone had ended with Mission 3, I would have a shit ton ton more praise for this game. But unfortunately, Mission 4 really twists the nipples on the old difficulty and whips out every dick move imaginable. Firstly, I was playing this game on Expert Agent setting, the third one. I love how his face changes with each of the settings. So let's couch the following within that. But Mission 4 starts bad and continues down a long, winding road of pain that never seems to end. There are blind corners with enemies around each one, sparse ammo and health pickups, so many mutant enemies to kill, which, unlike the human guards, don't drop ammo pickups when they die. Mission 4 is so tough and so fist-clenchingly frustrating that I actually had to start the whole thing over again because by the third floor, I was so low on health and ammo that I literally couldn't continue onwards. This was the point in the game where I learned the hard way that killing all the enemies on a floor is sometimes not the way to go, despite the fact that if you want a bigger and better score, you need to kill everything hostile. Let me tell you kids, the angst is not fucking worth it. Once I figured out where the red key was on each floor of Mission 4, I booked it back to the elevator. Fuck these fucking genetic fuck freaks. This shit was intolerable. It's dick move after dick move with convoluted map design that goes so far as to actually spell out the Jam Productions logo in one level. It's just, I have no fucking clue what they were thinking with this mission. It's so overindulgently brutal to the point where I felt like I was playing an entirely different game. Meanwhile, moving past this, missions 5 and 6 hit the point of actual boredom. I was really pushing myself to finish this game by the end of it, kids. Like, there were other games I needed to play, and I really fought hard to not just put this by the wayside because, holy dick, I don't remember the last time I played a shooter that, by the end of it, I was just going through the motions to get to the end of and put in my time served. Which is a damn shame, because the first half of Blake Stone is so fresh, so interesting, so new that I couldn't believe I was enjoying it as much as I was, only for the second half to descend into a nightmare of brutal difficulty and death and repetition. It really doesn't help that by the fourth mission you've seen all the textures and learned all the gimmicks and seen what the game is going to throw at you. It's just that missions 4, 5, and 6 decide to simply ladle on more and more of the same, as though Jam Productions figured that, shit, Wolfenstein had 6 episodes, why don't we do that too? Another thing adding to the repetitive nature of the game is the score, composed by Bobby Prince, the John Williams of the FPS genre. Prince's contributions here are great, don't get me wrong. I was nodding my head to the beat with a few of the tracks, but Prince only composed 6 tracks for the entire game, possibly because he was working on something else around the same time. And since Blake Stone has a whopping total of 66 levels across 6 missions, doing the math, you'll hear the same track on 11 maps each, which is kind of a lot to hear the same music throughout the course of one game. By the end of mission 6, with all the same textures and enemies and hearing the same music over and over again, I'll be absolutely frank, I was more relieved that the game was finally over than I was excited to have beaten it. Blake Stone Aliens of Gold is a super interesting piece of FPS history in that it really did take the Wolfenstein formula and tried to build on top of it. And for the most part, it really did, even if it didn't learn some simple lessons from the OG, such as stun locking enemies. There are such interesting additions here that the game really should get props for. NPCs, the auto map, interactable elements like interrogating informants and using food dispensers, and it has such a unique setting too. James Bond meets Flash Gordon is a wild concept, rife with possibilities. And while Blake Stone did get a sequel titled Planet Strike, it sadly did not do very well, and it's mostly regarded as feeling like more of an expansion pack than a full-blooded sequel. But unfortunately, Blake Stone outstays its welcome after the third mission, particularly through an abysmally unfair difficulty spike throughout the entirety of the fourth mission, and partially through being simply more of the same in missions 5 and 6. Despite being immensely playable and wholeheartedly original, Blake Stone Aliens of Gold just can't stick the landing on what is commendably a strong offering to the early genre of FPS games. It's generally on sale for cheap, and I would say it's worth it if only to play through the first 3 missions. After that, you're on your own, kids. Blake Stone Aliens of Gold gets a 7 out of 10. So let's go back a moment to the beginning of this video. Remember when I was talking about having terrible timing? Let's think about The Thing again for a second. If that film had released at any other time, it might have been a decent hit with filmgoers, except that E.T. had only come out 2 weeks prior, so the audience mood just wasn't primed for it. Well, as it turns out, Blake Stone Aliens of Gold also had the unfortunate circumstance of terrible timing. The game released onto the market on December 3rd, 1993, but just 1 week later, this little game from the creators of Wolfenstein would emerge like a rough fourth beast, its hour come at last, slouching towards Bethlehem. A game that would not only completely eclipse the release of Blake Stone, and not only establish the emerging FPS genre as one primed to dominate sales charts and the interest of gamers worldwide, but it would change the direction of PC gaming forever.